Talking today about Riesling, my favorite white grape, and it's almost my favorite grape overall. I really love Pinot, especially if it's from Burgundy, but Riesling's definitely up there. It's my go-to on a restaurant menu. It's my go-to most days of the week because whites and Riesling in particular, it's usually lower alcohol than a big red. It's lighter than a California Cab. It's lighter than Bordeaux. So I really like it. I find it complex. There's lots going on. If I'm picking a white, it's usually a Riesling, not a Pinot Grigio. Someone wrote me and asked what music I listen to. I'm not exactly sure why they wanted to know, but I figure, sure, let's talk about music for a minute. Recently, I found in my record collection Leonard Cohen. And this is a kind of greatest hits collection of songs that I had never listened to. I've had this sitting in a record cabinet for a few years now, and I finally decided to put it on and really liked it. And it led to a friend of mine giving me this, Live in Fredericton. Kind of an album that most people haven't heard of if they're familiar with Leonard Cohen. The songs they may know, but the recordings are really good. I'm just reading the back here. The song In My Secret Life and Bird on a Wire are kind of my two favorites on this right now. Anyway, this is going on probably 2 to 3 times a week. Love it. Sounds great. Quiet pressing. If you're into records, check this out. Let me know what you think. On to the wines. And if you're wondering if there's usually music on while I'm drinking wine, the answer is yes. So, Riesling. Kind of my favorite regions for Riesling, like a lot of people's, will be Alsace and Germany and Austria. This to me is where Riesling is really at its best. There's an Ontario Riesling in here, which we'll get to in a minute. And Ontario is doing some pretty great stuff with Riesling, but this is actually a blend with Gewürztraminer. We'll get to that in a moment. A lot of people and my friends who are not that into wine or just starting to get into wine usually think of Riesling as only sweet dessert style, late harvest kind of wines, which those are good too, but there's a whole other type of Riesling out there that if you're watching this, you're probably familiar with, and they're fantastic. I think it's my favorite grape. I said that at the beginning, and I stand by that. So the first one, which I poured just before I started here, this is an Alsatian Riesling the year. This is 2015. This to me is great because this is $15.95 in Ontario. It's really affordable. This is entry-level Riesling, and it's well made, and it lets you see what a typical Alsatian-style Riesling can be. Now, again, it's not that complex. It doesn't have a long finish or anything like that, but it's dry in style. It's less than 10 grams of residual sugar, and it's $16. This thing is super, super, super cheap. So let's see what's going on. Nice color, little light, but that's okay. It doesn't have a lot of sugar. This hasn't seen any oak, so you wouldn't expect it to be dark. It doesn't have any age on it. Let's see what it's all about. So on the nose, there's definitely that kind of petrol note that's coming from the skin of the grape. So sometimes it shows through like a beach ball or a garden hose or a tennis ball that doesn't sound that interesting, but it actually is pretty complex. It's nice that there's more than just apples going on in here and honeysuckle. There's some other layer that I think is pretty interesting. Lots of apple juice, lots of Allen's apple juice mixed with a hint of beach ball. I don't know if Allen's apple juice is in the States, but in Canada growing up, I always had these cans of Allen's apple juice. And this is exactly what this thing tastes like, except it's not sweet on the finish. In fact, a lot of acidity here, very clean, very crisp, lots of salivation going on. This is, again, as I said, it's not a long wine. There's not lots of complexity and flavors going on in my mouth, but really well made, really light in style, hot summer day, no problem. Sit outside on a patio. Here you go, $15. Let's give it one more try. A little bit of pear in there, lots of apple. Again, that acidity really on the back end kind of is really kicking in. That's kind of how this thing finishes. A little bit of sourness kicking in. but really clean, very crisp, very fresh. Let's move on. So the second wine we've got here is made by Jackson-Triggs. I picked this up because I'm going to be honest, I usually snub Ontario wines, and I don't really, I don't buy a lot of them. I don't want to try a lot of them, but I figured, got to support the place you live. And this was cheap. This was $11. It's a blend, as I said, of Gewürztraminer and Riesling, so maybe this actually isn't a fair test, but let's see what's going on. Gewürztraminer, if you're not familiar, usually comes across as lots of lychee and kind of candied orange. It's very aromatic, so it blends well with Riesling. I haven't had too many blends of these two outside of this. In Alsace, sometimes there'll be an Alsatian blend, and there might be some Pinot Gris in the mix, some Riesling and some Gewürztraminer. They don't come across too often where I live, but let's see what's going on here. As I said, this is $11, so really entry-level price point. Pretty similar in color, actually, to the Alsatian Riesling. Ontario has a cool climate, kind of similar to Burgundy. Cold winters, can get warm in the summer, but not too warm. We're not talking tropical kind of temperatures. On the nose, what's interesting is that petrol note is here, but that lychee kind of mandarin orange is actually sitting in almost a perfect blend. So it really does seem like there's a, oh, this thing's leaking. That's no good. I might have assembled it wrong. I'll have to check that out after. Anyway, there is a really more of a kind of an apricot quality here. And this isn't, it's not quite a fresh apricot. This is an apricot that's being dried out a little bit. This is an apricot that you might find in some kind of bulk food candy store where they've got the big bins, and there's the dried apricots, and you pick them up and you put them in a bag. That's a lot of what I've got going on here. Maybe it's apple. Yeah, it's kind of a mix of also dried out apple that has also been kind of put out to dry, and it's in those big bins. So apricots, apples, it's got a bit of that lychee thing going on the nose. Repeats on the palate, dry, a little bit of minerality in there that kicks in at the end, which is kind of nice. Pretty well made wine, actually, for 11 bucks. This is pretty good. I wouldn't be upset if someone gave this to me. Let's try it one more time. More apple, I think, on the palate. The nose had a lot of that dried apple and apricot, but the palate seems to be a lot of that apple note. Very similar in style, actually, to the Alsatian. I'm surprised how well this wine is standing up, because it's $6 cheaper. Good wine. I would recommend someone trying this. Why not? I'd keep another bottle of this around. Let's move on. So, move these around a little bit. German Riesling. So lots of different styles in Germany of Rieslings, lots of different quality levels, really good stuff. This particular Riesling, I don't know if you can read the label here, but it says at the bottom, I'm going to completely pronounce this wrong, my German accent's awful, SPÄTLESE. Anyway, that is a particular style that actually literally translates. The word literally is translating into late harvest. And there's kind of different levels of this. So Cabernet is going to be your driest in style. These are typically, the grapes are left on the vine at least, I think, 7 days to 10 days after when a typical harvest would happen. So the sugar content is getting higher. There's a level above this called Auslese, and those will be sweeter than this, so there's more sugar. Now this wine in particular has 50 grams of residual sugar, so it's going to have definitely a lot of that sweetness, but the balance in this should be really fantastic and a really well-made wine. This is 2013. I think this was 24 bucks. So not exactly as cheap as the other ones, but definitely a different style in a good region. Let's see what's going on here. Similar in color. They all pretty much look the same. Nothing was really darker than anything else. None of them had any significant age or anything. Now on the nose, this has a lot of petrol, a lot of that beach ball kind of nose, and this is more of a tennis ball. There's almost like that fuzz on the top of a tennis ball. That's what I'm smelling, a fresh can of tennis ball. You pop off that lid and, oh, yep, those are tennis balls in there. What else is going on in here? Tire. I'm like walking through a store where they're selling tires, and this sounds off-putting if you haven't had this before, but it's interesting. It's more than just your kind of standard Pinot Grigio, regular, you know, some lemon, some citrus kind of fruits. There's more going on in this wine. I'm excited to see what this is all about, but that's really the dominant smell here on the nose. Wow, can't get over. There's almost also a little bit of like green grapes. Like if you ever crush those grapes in your hands and then you smell your hand after, that sweetness from the grapes usually, that's getting a lot of that in here. Really great mouthfeel. Wow, this is really rich, and that's probably coming from the extra sugar. Lots of acidity here. I can't stop doing this. My mouth is just salivating. There's so much acidity here, and that is balancing out. Even though there's 50 grams of sugar, which sounds like a lot, and it is, there is so much brightness in that acidity that it really counters it well. This is really well-made wine. This is really fantastic. Not really any of that petrol note happening on the palate. Lots of that kind of apple note, fresh apple, maybe a little bit of apple core going on in there, but this is really rich mouthfeel. This is a heavier wine, the weight, the thickness, it's got a creaminess to it. This is really good. This would pair fantastically if you're making any kind of spicy dish, so some kind of Thai or something with some heat to it. This is really gonna counter some of that heat and pull back. It's gonna help dial down the sugar in this wine, the dish that you're having, and then this is also going to help with some of that heat coming off that dish. But this is really great. That acidity is probably going to keep making you want to eat and taste and enhance a lot of flavors. This is really great. Again, as I said, that this is probably $24 for a bottle, so it's not exactly the same as what was going on here, but this has a richness to it, and this has an acidity to it that's really fantastic. There's also a lot of minerality here. I'm gonna give it one last check on the palate. I can't stop smelling that tire and that tennis ball. It's really tennis ball fuzz. Go find this. Go find this. This is the Dr. HEIDEMANNS 2013 Riesling. This is really great stuff. All these are great. But go pick this up. If you've never had a German sweet Riesling before and you've only had the late harvest style, go find a medium sweet German Riesling and just check that acidity, how well it counters out that sweetness and how good it feels in the mouth, and you'll be surprised. This is really tasty stuff. Anyway, we will see you next episode.